Amen. How is it going? This seems, summer, it's a funny one, or warm weather, or good weather, or sunny weather. It's the same thing. Like, you come into church, and no judgment, I'm just telling you how I am. I get so cabin fevered on a Sunday morning. Church starts, I'm inside, and I don't know about you, I'm like. So, at a personal level, thank you for being in church this morning. I just went back. I'm not going to get to see my kids after church, so I went back to give them a hug. And I just got literally a group hug from the entire children's church department. You're not allowed to because you're on background checks, but let me just take my word for it. That is a good group of people. They're in good hands. I love Tab. I love Amy and Jessica and what they're doing. So we'll probably, real quick, before we even get into what will go on the video, if you are new here, here's what we would like for you to see or know or understand about what we're doing, is that churches in smaller areas have been struggling now for about 20 years, somewhere in there. The logging industry is such a good example in Oregon of people moving away from these smaller communities, the amount of money that's moved out of smaller communities, but these families and these generations and the lineage that's still there. And the solution to the church culture problem that's developed is that it's hard to afford a full-time salary for pastors. And so we're just praying that God will let us be a part of that, bringing a church family, a church community back into these smaller areas. And so if you see cameras in the back, just know I'm more uncomfortable with that than you are. But it's what we got, so that's what that's about. There's a lot of people I don't know. And specifically in this building, there's a lot of people that I don't know, and there's people that will watch that I don't know. There's so many times where I know that I'm preaching to someone that I don't personally know, but here's what I do know, is that based on our humanity, we tend to make God too small. We tend to make everything too small. It's a survival technique. We want to bring everything down to a smaller, manageable size so that we feel like that we can understand it. And so when we look at this God concept and we start singing about God of heaven and earth, did you stop in the middle of worship? Did you stop and consider what you were just saying? See, if we're not careful, we make God so small that we can even sing the words but not think about what that means. Father, or Lord of, what is it? First service said earth, wind, and fire. I don't think that's right. Did you stop it? Did you stop when you were singing those words? Did you stop and consider the magnitude of the words? Or have we just repeated the words so much that we have shrunk their meaning? You see what I mean? This whole God thing, if we're not careful, we will shrink the entire God concept in our minds. And here's the truth, is that people will argue with a small God. We're in a weird time. I'm working through a lot, and I think you would know this. This isn't a surprise. I'm working through things even transparently of as I'm learning and as I'm asking more questions. I think I grew up maybe in a region or in a culture that you weren't encouraged to ask questions. It was like comply, God, comply, and so you kind of play along, but deep down you have these questions of, well, then why is this true and why is that true? And so as we're trying to recreate a culture here that asks questions, we've got to constantly consider, in doing that, the magnitude of what the Bible tells us that God is. Now, believe or unbelieve, whether you're on board with what the words of God says or not, that's almost secondary to the fact that to understand what's being said, the magnitude of God has to be constantly reevaluated because we make God too small. This is going to be a long setup for a very mediocre sermon, but the setup, if it feels like it's taking a while, I hear you. God understood that we did this, and so here's the problem, is that a God that speaks into creation, with his words speaks creation. Do you know that modern science doesn't even know what gravity is made of? The arrogance of the scientific community that, well, we've determined that God couldn't possibly be. We don't even know what gravity is. We don't even know what atoms are made of. There's so much about the scientific world that we don't understand, yet the word says that God speaks and creation is the result of his words. See, we've gotten so used to that. We hear that and we're like, uh-huh. How sad is people that that's a function of how we operate? So if it's a God that speaks and creates, that means this, is that God knew we weren't going to conceptualize him accurately. A God that could do that is not going to fit into your conscious brain. We're awake, right? I will preach to myself. God says, you're not gonna understand me. You're not gonna get me. Actually, it's probably a good measurement. The more that you think you've got the God thing, that's a great way to kind of yep, I'm making God too small. I thought I understood him. So what God says is this. Okay, you're not gonna understand. It's too big. It's too much. It's too grand. It's too vast. So God's solution to us not understanding, not being able to understand the God concept was that he gave us, do you remember? Jesus. He gives us Jesus. He goes, I'm gonna take myself, I'm gonna put myself into human form so that I can have, Jesus is all human, he's all God, he's gonna speak the language. But here's what's important to remember, is that God is so big and so far beyond our grasp that when we listen to the words of Jesus, we are listening to human words, but we are also be given a window into the heart or the character or the nature of the Creator. Do you see why the words of Jesus have such magnitude? When Jesus speaks, he's telling us a little bit about himself. And that's why there was constantly times where Jesus would say something, and the disciples, there's one, I was reading this week, and it has nothing to do with the sermon, but they're arguing, and Jesus goes, I know what you're arguing about. And they're like, we weren't arguing. He goes, yes, you were. You're arguing about which of you is the greatest. I think the disciples might have been 5 years old, But what we're seeing is human nature, this created thing, you and I being the created thing. Think of us, in terms of we're the players in this video game, so to speak, and that God is the creator of the machine. He's so much beyond our grasp of understanding. But he sends his son, Jesus, in human form to speak to us in a way that allows us to start to grasp the nature of God. So I'm going to read you a story, and it's about 7 verses. Stick with me. You've probably heard this story. Here's the challenge. Don't minimize this story because you've heard it before. Don't take this story and go, yep, heard it, and file it away. Listen, and then we're going to go back and I want to dissect it for this purpose. John chapter 8, verse 3. It says, the teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group. Do you hear what I just said? They said they caught her, what? In adultery. Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. History will tell you that probably more than likely what happened is if she was caught in the act of adultery and they're wanting to kill her, chances are they didn't let her go home and get dressed first. There is a great historic probability that this lady was drugged in front of a group of Middle Eastern people, shamed, and stood in front of Jesus naked. You ever have that dream? You're in junior high and you're supposed to do something. You're like, Caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. What do you say? They were using this question as a trap in order for the basis of accusing Jesus. I'm paraphrasing. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, let any of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. Again, he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left with the woman standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? Verse 11, no one, sir. She said, neither. He said then neither do I condemn you. Jesus declared, go now and leave your life of sin. This story bugs me, and the reason it bugs me is because there are about 7 different elements balancing on a needle head point. This story, without one piece of everything that was mentioned, if one detail is left out, the story doesn't work. Unless they're all mentioned, the story falls apart. Because it sounds to me like Jesus is saying, you're off the hook, but that's not what he's saying. I have a lot of friends. Maybe you can relate. Hopefully you can relate. If you can't relate, change. A large majority of my friends are not church people. They're either far from God or they're brand spanking new to the concept of God. And so there are people that come in, not with church theology and deep biblical depth and understanding. And I don't know if you know this or not. I don't really love like Bible debate. It's just, but if a majority of my friends are either far from God or brand new to the concept of God, then they bring with them a lifestyle that does not necessarily align to the rules that we find in the Bible. Anybody understand that? Most of my friends do not look, act, talk, smell, think, exist like a Christian. Now, here's where that's an issue for me. It doesn't bother me. I'm the pastor of a church, and I recognize that title, it's something that God has asked me to do. This is where he's got me. I honor the role. I get that this is, when people see me, they see two things. They see Jordan, but they also see the pastor of the church. And so what's an appropriate response? Because even people in this church, like, that's the disadvantage of having a pastor that's still rodeoing. You're going to run into me outside of this place. Maybe some of you have run into me. And it's the like, how you doing? What's an appropriate response? Because the truth is this. I do not want to be the guy who's like, it's no big deal. There's no rules. You're fine. Don't worry. Like, man, I'm cooler than God. But I also don't want to be the one that would ever allow someone to feel alienated because they're not living according to the rules that I believe to be right. Do you see the balancing act here? And so I'm constantly in this place of like, God, just show me how to live in a way that is loving to people, that acknowledges your rule in my life, but that also acknowledges that you've got a plan for people's life and everybody's on this different scale. Show me the balance. Because my personal nature, my by nature is like, do whatever you want. I don't care. It's your life. And I don't really vary from that very often. Like if someone asks me, that's where we'll have a conversation. But you almost never hear me going, you know what? Just do whatever you want. If you run into me in public, don't pretend. If we're going to make my microphone a beer for a second, and this is not a sermon about beer, so chill out. But like, if I see you in public and you do this, hey, how's it? Yeah. That's your issue, not mine. That is your deal, not mine. Because what you're saying is like, I'm addressing some guilt in my life. Don't put that on me. That is not my fault if you feel that way. But there is a balance of where do the rules fall. Okay. I've been praying. It's been about a year. I would say it's been about a year. And that's why this story bugs me so much, is because I don't want to minimalize sin. Because if we'll remember, sin put Jesus on the cross. Your Jesus went to the cross for your sin. So don't tell me that your sin is not a big deal. I'm not going to endorse sin as being okay or healthy or beneficial, like it's good for you, of like, you bad brother, yeah. I just want to be cool. I don't really care about being cool either, and I don't want to alienate. So that's where we're starting. I feel like this week God showed me a little bit of what that means, because I genuinely want to know what the balance is. I'm going to categorize sin. I'm going to move sin into two categories. And the first category, we're just going to touch on it for just a second before we get to the second one. The first category, let's call it just like best practices. There are, and I'm doing air quotes, sin, but there are sins that even the Bible says is like they're not that big of a deal. You know what I mean? Like, have you ever gotten mad and punched a wall? It's not as though God is going to show up if you get mad and punch a wall and be like, hope that's still funny when you're in hell. It just doesn't fit. And to think of God being that way puts God in like this punitive, judgmental sort of light that doesn't fit who he is. I think if God were to walk in after you've just punched a wall in frustration, more than likely God would be like, how's your hand? How's that feel? You good? You can do that again? Think of like the way you would interact with your kids of like, do you think there's probably a better way to do that? 1 John, chapter 5. If you're wondering where I'm getting this, it's the Bible only, thank goodness. Verse 16, it says, if you see any brothers or sisters commit a sin that does not lead to death, you should pray and God will give them life. I refer to those whose sin does not lead to death. There is a sin that leads to death. I am not saying that you should pray about that. All wrongdoing is sin, and there is sin that does not lead to death. Did you know that was in the Bible? So this idea of like when you stub your toe and you think a naughty word, and you're like, oh. I don't think, in my opinion, and I'm not trying to assign different various amounts of guilt to certain sins, but I'm just saying in the Bible, there are times where God's like best practices of like, there's probably a better way to do that, right? Now, here's what we tend to do. We tend to assign all of our guilt. That's the best practices sin. That's the one we don't mind admitting. Oh, I get a little bit of a temper when I'm driving. Like I said, I'm a perfectionist. You know, those are the sins, the best practices sins. We're okay with everyone knowing about that. Here's why. People know you're not perfect, so you admit the sin that you don't mind them knowing about. There it is. That's why I'm not perfect, is this little, I got frustrated the other day. I did, and I said a little cuss, so. But I'm working on myself. I'm working on myself. I'm just working on myself. Anytime somebody, I'm working on myself, what they mean is the best practices type sin. That is not what this morning is about. So if you've got these little pet sins that you think really are not that big of a deal, that actually you could verify are not that big of a deal, fine. That's all I'm talking about. Because the second half, best practices, the second one is death sentences. This is fun. This is a fun morning, isn't it? I used to think this is where we got into the 7 deadly sins. Like the super, super bad sins. Here's the thing about sin, and it's funny, is that we grade it differently. I'm a dad. I have a little boy and a little girl, and I will openly admit I have absolute double standards on how I parent. My little boy could rip a fingernail off and be like, oh, I'm like, just be tough. You're okay. You're all right. Just be tough. My daughter could stub her toe, and I'd be like, do we need to go to the doctor? Total double standard. We do the same thing with our sin. Not that it's the same, but we do the same thing with our sin. Of other people's sin, we'll go to a protest. Do you have a sign? Who's got the markers? We're going to need a stick. Who's got the poster board? We're going to. We hate other people's sin, don't we? Do you know that it says that the woman was brought before Jesus? What it doesn't say is that Jesus was protesting at an anti-adultery rally. We stand against this one sin. Listen, as Christians, I'm not endorsing sin. I want to understand what sin is, but the truth is, you will always love your sin. That's our biggest issue, is that we love our sin more than we love Jesus. That's our biggest problem. If we could solve that, we're good. But we have these other sins that when we see them in other people, we hate them so much that we can even go, yeah, that needs punished. That should definitely be punished. We hate them so much that the concept of hell seems fair. Ooh, just got real quiet. Even the people that protest hell, I just don't believe in hell. I just can't believe that a God would send a. We'll talk about hell someday. I think it's different than what we understood, but we'll get back to that. But we all have this weird sort of measuring scale of our sin. We'll just categorize all of our own sin under the best practices. That's what you do. You move your sin to best practices, and you put everybody else's sin in the deadly sins part. Murder. Oh, that's got to be on the list, right? Murder, we can't wink at that. I'm assuming we don't have any murderers in here. We might. I'm looking for guilty faces. We generally don't know many murderers, But if we did, then we could be like, that one's got to be on the list, right? Hatred just in general. There's a few of these sins that were unforgivable, borderline unforgivable type sin. This is what when we think of sin, this is what we think of. Arresting the Senate. No, I'm just kidding. That was just an extra I just threw in. No, I'm kidding. You guys realize it's going to be on camera. We're going to look like lunatics when people watch this. But we begin to manage everything. We manage everything. We've got a little bit of an addiction problem. Man, I'm working on myself. Someone harms a child in any way, and we're straight to the lynch. You know what I mean? See how this works? Varying degrees. Our sin, your sin, that sort of thing, and we're managing it. And remember what I said that we do with God? Remember the very beginning how we started? We take this big, magnificent, unbelievable type God, and we put him into a box, and then we write on that box, religion. We fit God into our little box because religion is manageable. And religion, that's something that we can have an understanding of. We manage it. Well, the truth is, that's just a human nature thing. We do the same thing with our sin. We manage our sin. So, when you begin to, listen, push pause because this is important that we understand where we're going with this. The Bible gives a list of sin that comes with a death sentence. Death sentence. And I want to understand why. I want to make sure that we understand why. Because if we're not careful, sinners feel like there's no hope. Spoiler, we're all sinners, but people in sin feel like there's no hope, and the most religious among us feel like that we have the biggest right to go protest. But there is a sin that comes with a death sentence, and we are all guilty of it, but we have to understand what it is and how it is. Here's why. I am so tired of people in the church acting like absolute idiots Monday through Saturday and then hiding behind the grace ticket as though that's how this works. Well, it's hard. I mean, I love Jesus, but, Pendleton only comes around once a year. Jesus said this. Let's understand this story. Let's make sure we understand this story. Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. In the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. This is verse 4 and 5. Now what do you say? The whole story is about verse 6. This whole story, the whole story the woman brought in front of Jesus is about verse 6. Because here's where it is. It says they were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing Jesus. Remember, if you don't understand Jesus, you won't understand sin. And if you don't understand sin, you won't understand Jesus. The two are interconnected. And so what they were doing was they were managing. They're saying, we are good. She is bad. Managing sin. See what I mean? And they were managing the sin so that they could manage Jesus. And you do it too. You manage Jesus. And you manage Jesus by managing your sin. It's human nature of like, well, what I did isn't that bad. Why does everybody else get the things I'm praying for? Well, I try to be a good person. How could Jesus send a good person to hell? What you're doing is you're managing sin to manipulate Jesus. That is the story. Is that the Pharisees thought they were good. They found someone who was bad, and they were trying to manipulate Jesus. Religion is driven by comparison. Comparison is the fuel that fills up your religion. Well, I'm better than most people, so I must be good. Ergo, I'm a good guy. If I'm a good guy, all the promises that Jesus promises good guys, I'm in alignment for. So, based on someone being bad, I must be good, therefore I'm owed by Jesus. There should have been like 75 amens, and I didn't get one. You know why? Because we're all guilty of it. You know what you're thinking? Like, oh, crap, I do that. Thank you. They had a faulty view of sin because they had a faulty concept of Jesus. They had made Jesus too small. They didn't understand who Jesus was, and so they were managing themselves. Okay, verse 10. Jesus straightened up and asked her, woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? Remember, the words of Jesus are human words that we can understand, but they're said in a way that gives us a glimpse into the heart of our Creator, right? She's standing here as bare as someone can be. She's got nothing left. It doesn't say that she denied it. It doesn't say that she was like, no. She's guilty. She was headed for death, you guys. Death. Sin was about to pay off what it owed her. See, we forget that, don't we? That's what Jesus says. Jesus said the reason sin is it leads to death. Your pet sin that you're justifying that hasn't stung you yet, Jesus is saying it is not to your best benefit. It is not to your best interest. I'm trying to save you from a sin that is going to kill you. That is why when somebody's like, oh, don't be judgy, I'm like, it's not for me. Your sin is not sending me anywhere. Why? Your sin is not going to affect my eternity. So don't put it on me like that somehow I'm the source of your guilt. No one, sir. Then he said this, neither then do I condemn you, Jesus declared. Go now and leave your life of... Say it one more time because you got it right, but you may not know that you got it right. Go now and leave your life of... He did not say, leave your life of sins, did he? Singular. He said you're guilty of one sin. There's a lot of sins as a result, but you're only guilty of one sin. You go address that one sin. Everything else is going to start to line up. Let me explain it to you. He didn't say sins. He specifically said sin, singular. Here's why. He said it was her view of the one who had issued the law. That was her issue. That was her sin. Her sin was that in a moment of temptation, she didn't accurately understand who Jesus was. You guys, this is life-changing stuff. You came in this morning. Maybe you're watching online. I don't care how it is that you're receiving from God the word that he has for you this morning, but if you will let it, it can change your life this morning. This word coming through this microphone into your spirit can shape how you live for God. God said in moments of temptation, you are looking at the sins. You are not looking at the author of the rule book. And the rules themselves bring death, and you don't understand that in moments where you're like, oh, it's not that big of a deal. Your sin is not your sins. Your sin is that you are minimalizing the author of creation. You are sinning against the author of creation, and that is why it's a bad thing. But that's not all. See, this used to be my least favorite verse in the Bible. I wanted it to be wrong, and I couldn't make sense of it, because I had pretty much gotten my sin to a manageable point. I thought I was winning. Oh, the superior. Oh, man, finally I'm better than everyone. Woo. And then I read this. James chapter 2, verse 10. For whoever keeps the whole law and yet stumbles at just one point. Don't say it. Don't you say it. Jesus, I don't want to hear it. If you're about whoever keeps the whole law and yet stumbles at just one point is guilty of breaking all of it. Raise your hand if at just a surface level that seems unfair. Excuse the heck out of me. You're telling me it was one little day of gossip, week, month, year. But it's one thing that I do, okay? And that somehow I'm guilty at the same level. So what Jesus is saying is this. It's not a what. It's not what rule you broke. Listen to me. Listen to me. It is not what sin you committed. It's who you committed it against. Don't apologize for your sins. Apologize for your sin. For he who, not what, he who said, you shall not commit adultery, also said, you shall not commit murder. If you do not commit adultery, but you do commit murder, you have become a lawbreaker. You are branded with an S that says sinner. It's almost comical to think that the Pharisees came in wearing the brand that said sinner, and they were pointing at her brand that said sinner. She's got a brand and it says sinner and we can prove it. And Jesus is going, have you checked your, right here? It was guilty people that brought in a guilty woman. Moments of willful sin. Don't look so righteous. No, I'm not that. That's what the Holy Spirit does. The Holy Spirit right now is telling you, like, you know what it is. You can look all high and mighty if you want, but when you're sitting in this church, right where you're sitting, you know that I go, you know that sin that you're allowing? And you're like, no. The Holy Spirit's like, oh, really? Really? In moments of willful sin, the real sin is minimalizing God and elevating self, which is the exact same sin Adam and Eve committed. I mean, this is not a new game plan. The reason we acknowledge that sin is sin, and listen, don't turn this into like, we're going to go march on the streets. Okay, can you please not mention this church when you do that? It boils down to we don't want to be controlled. We want to be in control. That's what it is. Your willful sin is that you want to be in control. And you don't understand this about the nature of Jesus, that when you obey, it doesn't somehow elevate his God-ometer to a little brighter state. Here's my point. He didn't give you rules so that he could feel better about himself. He doesn't need you to obey. You need you to obey. And you know what? You can't. I think the people who would agree with me the most are the people who've tried the hardest. You ever tried? I can't win. Well, if I can't beat it, maybe it's not that bad. See? Management, minimalizing, management. 1 Colossians 16 says, for in him all things were created. That could be the sermon. Those words should be enough. Hey, guess what? God created everything. Ready? Go. You're like, oh man, I'm just going to take me a year. We just skip over that. God created all things. Things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities, all things have been created through him and for him. That means not for you. So when you're managing your sin, you're like, I don't see why this is a big deal. It may not be messing up your plans for yourself, but it may very well be chaining you to a lack of growth that is keeping you from his plans for you for himself. You are staking ownership of yourself when you continually, willfully sin. It's a fun sermon, isn't it? I want to be very careful. How much time do I have? Okay, yeah. I want to be very careful because we lost a dog this week, and I don't want it to seem like I'm like, you guys, I'm going to appeal to your emotions so that you'll understand this. That's not what I'm doing, but I felt like this week I got to see it played out because, like I said, I've been asking, like, God, I know that sin matters. And I know that everybody I seem to spend the most time around is huge sinners. And I know that I'm the pastor. Like, is this on me? Am I a bad dad? For you guys that don't know, I've got like 15, 20-year-old kids that I'm like, I feel like a dad to, which is not okay. I'm not that old. Am I a bad dad? Huck, and he's the brindle dog. You guys probably saw him around here. We're moving steers, and there was a steer that kept laying down. And so I told Lacey, I'm like, just jump. You jump in the truck, and you take this load. I'll load the next load by myself. And as soon as she gets in the truck, I'm like, oh, man, where are the dogs? Because Huck has this thing he does that he lays under the tire, and I'm always yelling at him, like, no, just get out of the way. What am I giving him? I'm giving him a rule, right? And when he's laying in the shade and it feels good, then by definition, he is in sin. I'm not judging him. I'm not saying, well, you're a bad dog. What I'm saying is, like, this is not a place for you. This is not a good place for you. Lacey gets in the truck, and she takes off, and I'm sitting right there when it happens. It's a weird thing. It's a weird thing to see sin finally pay off, isn't it? You know, the Bible says that the wages of sin is what? And we don't even believe that. We're like Huck, like, oh, they say something could happen, but it's a heartbreaking thing to see sin finally pay off. And yet we feel like our hands are tied or that we're managing our sin or I've done this my whole life, nothing bad's ever come of it. And we don't even understand like what our life would look like in alignment with God and his purpose is so much better. And it's possible that you're living an absolutely terrible life compared to the life you could be living if you'd start to address your disobedience. I'm not saying more money, better circumstances. I'm saying more love, more joy, more peace, more patience, more long-suffering. All the things that God says he'll produce in your life that may be gone because you're allowing willful sin. Here's what's interesting, is that when Jesus had a talk with this lady, he was saying, you were caught in adultery because you didn't know me. You were sinning against a nameless, faceless rule that you disagreed with. This is what he's telling this woman. This is what he's saying to the woman, like, hey, look around. You were under the tire, and I got you. I got you. You're safe. But now you know me. You can no longer think that God assigned rules out of judgment or out of hate. You can no longer assume that a Jesus who would pull you out of your sin, how could you accuse him of being hateful and putting rules that are restrictive? So he says, go back. Go back to your life, but remember what sin was. Sin was, it was me. You were sinning against me. And remember what I did for you. Don't forget my voice. Isn't that what he's saying? Isn't that what he's saying? Like, don't forget my voice. My voice is not the guy picketing on the sidewalk. That guy's not me. My guy is not the preacher saying you're all going to hell. My voice is not that. My voice is saying get out from under the tire before it's too late. Come out of this place that's going to cause you irreparable damage before it's too late and I can no longer help you. And that is the challenge of being a Christian, is to love people in the process where they don't feel alienated. Like that if they don't change, they're not going to be loved. That is our challenge as Christians, is to say, I will love you all the way to hell. But that does not take away the risk or the damage or the death associated with sin. And it wasn't put there to be restrictive. It was put there to save your life. Go now and leave your life of what? Not sins, remember. So whatever specific sin comes to mind, keep in mind that in that sin, the sin that you love, you are minimalizing the concept of God by saying, I don't see how this is that big of a deal. You're minimalizing God. You're elevating self. And that is what sin is. Let's pray. Lord, give us a renewed concept of your magnitude. God, we'll argue with a small God. We'll argue with nameless, faceless rules. God, we'll go out and picket for our tribe or for our team, and we'll be against this and we'll be against that. But God, your nature is love. Your loving nature is what saves us and puts us back where we're supposed to be. God, that if there's a rule that's been issued, it's been issued out of love, protection, and safety for our own benefit, for our own good. God, let us not be Christians who use those rules like sticks to poke people who disobey. God, let us know that conviction is from you. Conviction is from you. When you come in and you say, you can do better than this. I've got a better life for you than this. Just because you don't see the damage does not mean that danger is not present. Just because the tire has never got you before. God, let us see you in a proper light, in a way that gives us an appreciation for your rules. Lord, like David said, your rules are hidden in our heart, that we might not sin against you. Give us an accurate view of you. I pray in Jesus' name, amen.